Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. Today we learn Parashat Emor. Parashat Emor, the first part of the parasha is about the Kohanim, the laws of the Kohanim. So the Torah teaches us that the Kohanim, which is from the family of Aharon HaKohen, Aharon was Moshe's brother, his children, and then their children, they are the Kohanim. It's a bloodline. And the Kohanim have certain rights, certain privileges, and certain responsibilities. So the Torah begins by telling us that the Kohanim should not go to cemeteries, should not come in contact with the dead, should not be involved with burials in general, unless it's one of their immediate relatives. 7 immediate relatives. Their 7 immediate relatives is 2 above, 2 on the side, 2 below, and the spouse. What that means is 2 above is a father or mother, 2 on the side would be a brother or a sister, an unmarried sister, 2 below would be a son or a daughter, and then on the spouse would be the final one. Those are the 7 relatives. That for these 7, the Torah tells us la'itama. The Torah says for these 7 Kohanim should indeed be involved with the burial and should become tameh. So when someone comes in contact with a dead person or a corpse or comes close to a corpse involved with the burial, the Torah tells us that that person becomes tameh or impure. And normally Kohanim should not become tameh. Even if they already are tameh, they shouldn't add to it, meaning they cannot get involved with the burial and they should not become tameh, unless it's one of these 7 relatives. There's a lot to discuss about this. One of the things that comes up is as follows. If a Kohen who normally should not go to a cemetery, normally a Kohen should not go to the cemetery, and the Torah tells him, but for your 7 immediate relatives, you must get yourself. It's not giving you an option to, but it's a mitzvah for the Kohen to be involved with his father's burial, to go to the cemetery for his mother. And normally he's not allowed to. So if normally he's not allowed to go to the cemetery, the Torah says for the relatives he must, and all the more so our sages teach us for non-Kohanim, for a Levi or for Yisrael, non-Kohen, that if that person's father passes away or mother passes away, they must be involved with the burial as well. They must be involved with the Avelut process. And from here, we learn the source of the Torah for the mitzvah of Avelut. Mitzvah of Avelut is mourning. And there are all sorts of practices, but essentially when someone loses a close relative, is one of these 7 relatives, they go through a process of mourning. They do what's called kriya. Kriya is they tear their shirt, they say a bracha of Baruch Dayan HaEmet, proclaiming and understanding that this is coming from God and it's all done justly and correctly, and this is not an accident and it happened at the proper time. It's a very difficult time to make a blessing to God, almost saying that I acknowledge that you were behind this because the person is faced with tragedy, but that is helping the person to understand how there's a God running the world. There is the burial that's done immediately. It's a mitzvah for the person to be involved with. And then there's something called the Seudat Havra'ah, which is after the burial, the mourners, the Avelim, they come home and someone else feeds them, symbolically saying how we're taking care of you. You don't need to worry about what you're going to eat because we're going to provide for you. We're going to take care of you, the family around you, or the friends around you. And then there's the Shiva, 7 days of intense mourning. No wearing leather shoes, no bathing, no showering, no changing out of that clothing for 7 days in sense, except for Shabbat. I'm not going through an exhaustive list of Hilchot Avelut here, but just giving a high level. Then after those 7 days, it goes into the next for the 30 days. So it like the Avelut goes down a notch. So now they can wear leather shoes and they can shower and they can change their clothing, but there still is a form of mourning until 30 days. The children would not shave or get haircuts, or the family doesn't shave or get haircuts for the 30 days. And then after the 30 days, approximately 30 days, again, depending on the relative, for the children, it's an extra day. But after that, then they can get haircuts, they could shave, but they shouldn't go to parties, they shouldn't go to celebratory occasions, they shouldn't be dancing, involved with the celebratory music, etc., up until the year. And then at the end of the year, they move on. And throughout the process of Avelut, the sons say Kaddish or This is not just the sons, the Avelim, they say Kaddish throughout the entire year, the Ilui Neshama of the person. All of these practices that we have of mourning some of them are from the rabbis, some of them are custom-based, and some of it is from the Torah. And where is the source in the Torah? The answer is here. It doesn't say it explicitly, but it says it in the context of the Kohanim. It says the Kohanim shouldn't go to the cemetery unless it's for one of their relatives, then they need to get themselves involved. That is the source in the Torah that you must get involved with Avelut, must get involved with the burial and the mourning of a relative. It's taught by Kohen, but it's deduced logically to apply to all of the Jewish people. Okay, so that was a little bit to discuss here. One thing that I'll say is that, I've read many articles, and you probably could do your own research about how the Avelut that the Torah prescribes and the rabbis prescribe, or sages give us, the Avelut, the process of mourning that I had just very quickly explained, that we have in Judaism, helps people deal with the tragedy. The structure that Judaism provides for mourning helps people with grieving. And you can imagine, again, this is not, everyone grieves and goes through their mourning in their own unique personal ways, but you can read different psychological articles out there, just go search it, that there are times where people don't know how to move on or when to move on. And they are struggling and grieving for a lot, and they're not, or maybe they're not really feeling the pain because they're in denial. What Judaism, with the Torah, with the halakha is giving us is take a day that's extremely intense and then bring it down a notch, but you have a week that is very intense, and then you bring it down a notch and you have 30 days. And it gives people the framework to get to the point that they say, I've felt it, I've grieved it, I've internalized it, I've realized it, it was real, and I'm ready to move on. And even that, we don't move on forever. Every year there is what's called the Yortzeit, or the Sal, how every year the mourners are saying Kaddish. Many have the custom to fast on the day of the Sal, of the Yortzeit, of the day of the anniversary of the day that the person passed away. So it's built in so that people are able to feel it, to grieve it, not to deny, but to really experience it and then move on. So this is something that's to the credit of the Torah that helps. That it's not one. There are many laws of the Torah that we don't necessarily understand. This is a law that we very clearly understand and can see the psychological benefits for it. Be'ezrat Hashem, I pray that no one has to go through suffering and to go through avelut. But it's part of life that people experience this, and having the structure of the Torah helps people cope and navigate through the mourning difficult time periods. Okay, we're going to continue. One thing we'll mention about Kohanim, as we're saying, there's a mitzvah. It says over here, "V'kidashto ki lechem lechem makriv kadosh yelach ki kadosh lechem." The Torah tells us here that you should sanctify the Kohen. You should give the Kohen. You should sanctify the Kohen. You should give the Kohen preference. You should give the Kohen, he should go priority. So for example, when we're reading the parts of the Torah, the Kohen gets the first aliyah. Generally speaking, the Kohen gets the first aliyah. Why? V'kidashto. The Torah says, because when it comes to holy items, he goes first. Or if there's a group of people saying Birkat HaMazon, who says Birkat HaMazon? Who leads the Birkat HaMazon? The Kohen leads the Birkat HaMazon. Why? Because v'kidashto, we give him preference. Not just that, Chachamim tell us that if you have a mana yafa, if you're serving food, I said this on Shabbat. Let's say there's poppers, or there's cholent, or there's cholent ochodov, whatever there is, and there's a buffet. If there's a kohen there, you should give the spoon to the kohen first. Unless there's not going to be something left for you, then it's you have to fight for yourself. Stick those elbows out. I'm kidding. You need to give respect to the Kohen. This is indeed a mitzvah of the Torah to give respect to the Kohanim, and that's something we see from this parasha. But why? Not because the Kohen is any better than the rest of us, because the Kohen is serving as a representative of God to serve as a role model for the rest of the Jewish people. The Jewish people should look up to the Kohanim, should respect the Kohanim, and should strive to behave like them. So the Kohen is built in giving these higher privileges that we, the non-Kohanim, have to respect them, because when the Kohen is holding himself to higher standards and we respect him, we in turn want to be like him. So this is, I said this on Shabbat, this is like the line of with great power comes great responsibility, quoting Spider-Man or Uncle Ben from Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. The Kohen is given the power that everyone is giving him priority. But the responsibility is that we're all looking at him and we all are using him as a role model. So he better behave. And if he doesn't behave properly, then he's using that higher status really to lead and influence people to behave improperly. And that's a terrible, terrible sin. And so the Torah also says this for the rest of Am Yisrael. Later on in the parasha, it says, "V'lo techalalu et Shem Kodshi v'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael." It's a mitzvah in this week's parasha, the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem and Chilul Hashem. Torah says, "V'lo techalalu et Shem Kodshi." Do not desecrate my name. V'nikdashti b'toch b'Yisrael. On the contrary, sanctify my name. Chilul Hashem is when someone who is representing God behaves in a certain way, even if it's technically permitted. But if he behaves in a certain way that people will look at it and it leaves a bad taste in their mouth, and that is a representation of God. When you are an observant person and you behave in a certain way, you're representing the Jewish people, you're representing the community, you're representing God, you're representing the Torah. And so when you misbehave, understand that what you're doing is bringing down everything with you. But when you behave and you hold yourself to higher standard, and you're sanctifying the name of God. Because when someone looks at how you behave and says, wow, that's how I want to raise my kids, or that person's parents, that's who I want to get training lessons from on parenting, because look at what they did, look how they raised their child. When someone looks at you in that sense, that is sanctifying the name of God. That is elevating the same way how the Kohanim are supposed to be for the rest of the Jewish people, raising the bar. We're supposed to be raising the bar by acting properly to influence others within the Jewish community and without the Jewish community. But we should be holding ourselves to higher standards, not because we're any better than anyone else, but because we're given this responsibility to hold ourselves to higher standards. And sometimes something might be technically permitted, but it doesn't smell right. Even if it's technically permitted and defensible, don't do it. Hold yourself to higher standards. That's what the Torah tells us here. It's very beautiful. The end of the parasha, it's not really the end. The last couple parts of the parasha go through all of the Jewish holidays. And it says, here are the Jewish holidays, the Moadim as they're called, and Elehem Moadai. These are what they are. There are 6 days you can do work. On the 7th day you rest. So very simply understood, this is the 6 days of the week. We can work, we get our work done, but on the 7th day is Shabbat, we rest on Shabbat. And then the Torah goes through all of the holidays. It gives us the mitzvah of Pesach. Pesach has 7 days in it. The 1st and 7th day are Yom Tov. The rest is what's called Chol HaMoed. That's what's taught here. And by the way, we read this portion of Emor, we read this on Pesach because it's including it there. After we teach the holiday of Pesach, there is a law here of Yashan, or sorry, there's a law here of Kemach Yashan, which if there's time, I'll come back and explain it. But it essentially is there. You'll go to the supermarket and you'll see that sometimes things have a label called Kemach Yashan. That Kemach Yashan law is introduced to us here in the Torah in this week's parasha. The next section talks to us about the mitzvah of Sefirat HaOmer, how there's a mitzvah from the 2nd day of Pesach to begin counting 49 days, count days and weeks. And we get to 49 days, which is 7 complete weeks. The 50th day will be the holiday of Shavuot, which is the next section. The next section is telling you we get to the holiday of Shavuot. Then, excuse me, then we get introduced to the holidays that are in the 7th month of the year, the month of Tishri, which is on the 1st of the 7th month is Rosh Hashanah. The Torah calls Rosh Hashanah Zichron Teruah, a time of remembrance through blasts of shofar. So you see from here, you have a mitzvah of Teruah. Teruah is shofar blasts, or blowing the shofar. So you see from here that you have a mitzvah on that day to blow the shofar. That's what it's introduced here, Zichron Teruah. We learn about the 10th of the month of Tishrei, the 10th of the month, the 7th month. The 10th day of the 7th month is Yom Kippur. It's a time of atonement. It's a time of improvement. And it's also a time of self-affliction. The Torah says you should be self-afflicting yourselves. Our sage, you should pain yourself. But our sages don't say this. This isn't something that you afflict yourself however you want. There are prescribed ways of doing it. Not eating or drinking for a full day. No eating or drinking. No relations between husband and wife. No showering or bathing. No anointing oneself with oils. And no wearing leather shoes, which is it's like more of a protective shoe. Nowadays, you could find non-leather shoes that are extremely protective, but in the times when our sages prescribed these forms of affliction, you can imagine the shoes that they had were either like protective sandals that were like made out of leather or socks. So it was essentially basically saying, you're wearing socks on this day. You're wearing something that's very like canvas, very light. That's taught here. And the Torah tells us it's Erev ad Erev Tishmitu Shabbatachem. This fast begins in the evening and lasts until the following evening, which is exactly what we do with Yom Kippur. We fast for 24, 25 hours. Then it gets to the 15th day of the month of Nisan, of Tishrei, 15th of that month, and that is the holiday of Sukkot. And the Torah tells us for the holiday of Sukkot, we have the mitzvah of living in the Sukkah. This is a mitzvah of the source of telling us to sit in a Sukkah, to live in a Sukkah for a full week. It also tells us the mitzvah of shaking the lulav, etrog, hadas, and harava, the arba minim, the 4 species that we shake. It's all done in this week as well. It tells us and prescribes all of those. And then the Torah ends up with some other portions. There's a story at the end, but essentially this whole section that we have about the holidays is read during the Chagim. We read this section during the Chagim because it speaks so much about the holidays. A lot of the laws that we have of the holidays are taught. All of the laws of Sukkah, the laws of Lulav and Etrog, the laws of Shofar, it's all taught in this section. And for that reason, it's something that we read during the holidays as well. Okay, with that, I'll stop. I'll pause here if anyone has any questions.